Top 10 serial killers that escaped prison. They're the monsters that haunt our nightmares. The ones who were caught, convicted, and supposedly locked away for good. But for a chilling few, the story didn't end that way. For the most cunning, ruthless, and sometimes just the luckiest killers, a prison sentence was just another problem to be solved, another system to beat. Or, in some cases, a consequence they never had to face at all. Now, we're not talking about Hollywood prison breaks with daring escapes over walls and through tunnels. We're talking about something much more unsettling. The killers who simply walked free. The ones who used legal loopholes, outsmarted the law, or just vanished into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of terror and one horrifying question. What happens when the justice system fails to hold a monster accountable? Number 10, Bible John. Kicking off our list at number 10 is a phantom who haunted the dance halls of Glasgow back in the late 1960s, Bible John. Over 2 years, 3 young women were murdered after nights out at the Barrowland Ballroom. Witnesses said the man they were last seen with was well-dressed, well-spoken, and had a strange habit of quoting scripture, which earned him his chilling nickname. It sparked one of the biggest manhunts in Scottish history, but it turned up absolutely nothing. No one was ever charged, let alone arrested. To this day, the identity of Bible John is a complete mystery. A ghost who killed and simply faded away, never facing a single day in prison for his sins. Number 9. The Monster of Florence. Our next case takes us to the rolling hills of Tuscany, Italy, and it's even more baffling. From 1968 to 1985, a series of brutal double murders plagued the province of Florence. The killer, dubbed Il Mostro di Firenze, or the Monster of Florence, targeted couples and parked cars, using the exact same .22 caliber Beretta in each attack. The investigation was a chaotic mess that spanned decades and ruined the lives of multiple innocent men who were wrongfully accused. But the real killer was never truly identified. The trail just went cold. The gun was never found, and the monster was never caught. He remains a specter in Italian criminal history, a killer who completely evaded justice, leaving only fear in his wake. Number 8. Niels Hogel. Coming in at number 8, we have a case that shows how a killer can hide in plain sight. Niels Hogel was a German nurse who seemed dedicated to his job, but underneath that facade was a horrifying compulsion. Hogel would inject patients with medication to cause cardiac arrest, just for the thrill of resuscitating them and playing the hero. The problem is, he often failed. For years, the strangely high death rates at the hospitals where he worked went mostly unexamined, while he was eventually caught and sentenced in 2015. Later investigations revealed the true, horrifying scale of his actions. It's now believed he may have murdered 300 people, making him Germany's most prolific serial killer in peacetime. For years, he escaped any suspicion or justice while wearing a caregiver's uniform. A wolf hiding right amongst the flock. While he's now locked away for life, for years he avoided any consequences for the vast majority of his crimes. Number 7. Pedro Rodrigues Filho. At number 7 is a man some have called the Brazilian Dexter, Pedro Rodrigues Filho. He committed his first murder at just 14 years old and claimed to have killed over 100 people, specifically targeting other criminals. His most infamous act happened while he was already in custody. During a police transport, he murdered a fellow inmate, a convicted rapist, right under the guards' noses. While in prison, he even killed his own father, who had murdered his mother. He was eventually sentenced for 71 of these murders, but due to Brazilian law capping sentences at 30 years, he was released in 2007 after serving 34. He was released again in 2018 after another short stint.
His unique brand of justice finally ended when he himself was shot and killed in March 2023.
Number 6. The Long Island Serial Killer. Our sixth case is a chilling reminder that some monsters live quiet lives right next door for decades. For over 10 years, the case of the Long Island serial killer terrorized New York after the discovery of human remains along Gilgo Beach in 2010. The investigation into a killer targeting sex workers grew massive, but eventually went cold, becoming a frustrating and terrifying mystery.
In July 2023, authorities arrested an architect named Rex Heuermann. Using burner phones and DNA from a discarded pizza crust, police finally closed in on the man they believe had been hiding in plain sight in a suburban home for years. While Heuermann now faces charges for multiple murders and awaits a trial that might not start until 2026, for more than a decade, the killer was free. A ghost who had escaped justice while the victims' families waited in agony.
It's shocking to see how many of these predators walked free for so long. If you're finding these stories as compelling as we are, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world's most baffling criminal cases. Now, let's get to our top 5. Number 5. Charles Sobhraj. Coming in at number 5 is a master of manipulation and escape, Charles Sobhraj, better known as the Serpent. He preyed on Western tourists along the quote-unquote hippie trail in Southeast Asia during the 70s, acting as a con artist, thief, and murderer. He drugged, robbed, and killed at least a dozen people, using his charm to make him incredibly hard to pin down. He was jailed in India in 1976, but managed to escape only to be recaptured. After serving his time, he was released in 1997 and went back to France as a free man. Then, in a stunning display of arrogance, he returned to Nepal in 2003, one of the few places where he still had an outstanding warrant, and was promptly arrested. He was convicted and imprisoned, but in December 2022, he was released due to old age and sent back to France, once again escaping a full life sentence for his horrific crimes. Number 4. Luis Garavito. At number 4 is one of the most prolific and depraved killers in modern history, Luis Garavito, or La Bestia. Posing as a monk, a beggar, or a disabled man, Garavito preyed on poor and vulnerable boys across Colombia in the 1990s. He confessed to the torture, rape, and murder of around 190 children, but the real number could be over 300. When he was caught in 1999, he was sentenced to 1,853 years in prison. But here's the twist. Colombian law at the time capped the maximum sentence at 40 years, and because he helped police find bodies, his sentence was cut even further to just 22 years. The idea that this monster could be released sparked national outrage. In a way, justice was served when Garavito died from cancer in prison in October 2023, but he never came close to serving a sentence that fit his atrocities. Number 3. Pedro Alonso Lopez. Our third case is arguably one of the most terrifying because the killer was caught, confessed, and was then just set free. Pedro Alonso Lopez, the monster of the Andes, admitted to killing more than 300 young girls across South America in the 1970s. After his capture in Ecuador in 1980, he actually led police to the graves of 53 of his victims. Despite confessing to 110 murders in that country alone, the maximum sentence was only 16 years. He was released after 14 for, quote, good behavior in 1994. He was then deported to Colombia, declared insane, and put in a psychiatric hospital for a few years before being deemed, quote, sane and released on a $50 bail in 1998. And then he vanished. Interpol has issued warrants for his arrest, but to this day, nobody knows where the monster of the Andes is. Number 2, the Zodiac Killer. At number 2 is the killer who turned Northern California into his personal playground of terror, the Zodiac. Active in the late 60s and early 70s, the Zodiac murdered at least 5 people but claimed he killed 37 in taunting coded letters he sent to newspapers. He craved attention, sending complex ciphers and threatening more violence if he wasn't on the front page. He was playing a game with the police and the public, creating a myth around himself that still exists today. Despite a massive investigation, countless suspects, and decades of detective work, the Zodiac was never identified. He was never caught, never prosecuted, and never served a day in jail, leaving behind a legacy of unsolved puzzles and unending fear. Number 1. Jack the Ripper. And finally, at number 1, we have the case that created the very blueprint for the uncaught serial killer, Jack the Ripper. In the autumn of 1888, the impoverished Whitechapel district of London was gripped by pure terror as a shadowy figure began murdering women in the most brutal ways imaginable. At least 5 victims are credited to the Ripper, but the true number could be even higher. The killer taunted the police with letters, even giving himself his infamous name. The media frenzy was unlike anything seen before, but even with one of the biggest manhunts in British history, the killer was never found. Over a century later, countless theories have been spun, but his identity remains the greatest mystery in the history of true crime. Jack the Ripper is the ultimate killer who escaped justice, a nameless phantom who committed unspeakable acts and then simply melted back into the London fog, forever uncaught. From legal loopholes that set monsters free to phantoms who were never even identified, these 10 cases show the terrifying truth that prison walls aren't always enough. They're a stark reminder that some of history's most evil criminals never truly paid for what they did, leaving behind pain, mystery, and the chilling knowledge that they got away with